occasionally challenge my students with the most important single question, which is, who is the greatest athlete of our day? And I have my own way of evaluating that, and that is, who is it that plays their game better than anybody else plays their game? And if they played their particular game so much better than everybody else, that would make the greatest athlete. So I guess a few years ago it would have been pretty easy. It would have been a basketball player who seemed to play his game a bit better than everybody else did, Michael Jordan. And today you're kind of down to three choices, it seems to me. It's either a golfer or a tennis player, although he's starting to slide a little bit, or more likely a swimmer, who not only wins every race he swims, but also sets a world record pretty much every time he swims. But back in the mid-'60s, it was probably a baseball player who played his game so much better than everybody else did. He made otherwise competent professionals look totally incompetent by comparison. And he was interesting because he only played his game occasionally. That is, he was a pitcher, so he only played every third or fourth day. Now, this was back in the day when pitchers were not wusses like they are today. Today pitchers, they'll pitch 220 innings a year because they're little arms, can't take any more than that. This was back in the days when a pitcher would start 40 or 45 games and pitch 350 innings. And if you had a pitcher as dominant as this one, and you happened to get to the World Series, you would pitch him in game 1, 4, and 7. Because you knew he was going to win those three, and you try to put some rag out there to win the fourth game, and there you go. That's your World Series one. And so his team gets to the World Series. The year is 1965, and everybody knows what the Dodgers are going to do. They're going to pitch Sandy Koufax, the world's greatest pitcher, in games 1, 4, and 7. But it's not going to happen. Because it just so happens that the first game of the World Series happens to be on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in Jewish religion, and Sandy Koufax is a Jew. And in an act which is almost unimaginable today, Sandy Koufax refuses to pitch the first game of the World Series because his identity as a Jew is more important to him than his identity as a baseball player. I can't tell you how much I admire that. I tell my students, I wish you had that sort of Christian identity. If you had an identity that ran so deep that when a person asked you who you were, the first thing you would say is, well, I'm a Christian. Because that's what identifies me more than anything else does. I want to close with kind of some reflection on deep Christian identity from the Sermon on the Mount. I teach the freshman Bible majors Life and Teachings of Christ every year, and we spend about 6 weeks kind of meditating on the Sermon on the Mount. I force my Bible majors to memorize it. I know some of them do it the day before and they've forgotten it the day after, but a few of them memorize it in such a way that it gets lodged in their heads and never gets totally dislodged. And it is a provoking, disturbing sermon. It begins with blessing. Blessed are the poor in spirit. The poor in spirit are interesting. The background for the poor in spirit is the Anawim. In the Old Testament, the Anawim are those Jews who are so pathetic that when the Israelites are taken into captivity, no one wants them. We leave them behind because they're not worth taking with us. Now, there have been 2 times in my life when I was part of the Anawim. The first time was when I was in Harding College, and my intramural team was playing slow-pitch softball, in which you use 10 players. And in intramurals, they usually assigned 11 or 12 players to a team because usually somebody couldn't be there, so somebody would have to sit the bench every now and again when everybody showed up. And so I was sitting the bench and then noticed that my team only had 9 players in the field. You cannot truly feel abused until you realize your team would rather play short-handed than have you out there. And now I know what it feels like to be the Anawim. Chapter 2. I applied for a job at Harding Graduate School of Religion. I was fresh out of Syracuse University, looking for a job. They needed a theology professor. That's what I was, and they didn't hire me. But that's not what made me feel like an Anawim. What made me feel like an Anawim is they hired nobody. Now think about that. It's one thing to finish second to a really good candidate. It's another thing to finish second to nobody. We've thought it over, and we would rather have nobody than you. Okay. Anawim. Everybody be an Anawim sometime in your life? I want you to imagine what it's like to hear Jesus get up and say, "Blessed are the Anawim. Yours is the kingdom of heaven." They didn't hear that as command. They heard that as blessing. And so he rolls through these blessings that we call the Beatitudes. I'm starting to feel a little better about myself. And then he starts talking about righteousness. And in the heart of the sermon, which is chapter 5 after the Beatitudes, he gives 6 examples of what it means to be righteous, which are really provoking. I've come to think of this as sick, bad goodness. One of the great things with working with 18 to 22-year-olds is you learn a whole new vocabulary. Now, if you're not aware of this, there is something better than good, and that is bad. If something is bad, that is better than just good. And if it's really bad, it's sick. So, what I want to talk about is sick, bad goodness. My friend Mike Cope refers to this as deep inner goodness, but he's not as cool as I am. What this really is sick, bad goodness. And he gives 6 examples, and I'm going to, in my time, look at 3 of them. Don't have time to look at all 6, and if I were talking to my classes, I would spend a lot of time on the adultery and lust one, but I'm not going to do that because you're not 18 to 22. Not that you're older, but I just don't think there's much hope. So anyway, what I want to look at is the one that has to do with murder, the one that has to do with integrity, and the one that has to do with enemies. And by then we will have gotten the idea. Verse 21. By the way, this sermon was not only good, it's brilliant. You have to appreciate kind of how Jesus comes at things here. "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" Anybody feeling pretty good about yourselves yet? Yeah. I am feeling good. I have not killed anybody all day. You know? And I've got to think, I'm going to get through the day. I'm not going to kill anybody. So, great. I got the murder covered. And then, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, 'Reka,' is answerable to the Sanhedrin, but anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with your brother, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." Really easy, to kind of get caught up in the details here. What's it mean to say "you fool"? To really do that, I would have to use language that would be offensive to many of you. Saying "you fool" is to say something that raises questions about a person's kind of fundamental worth as a human being. Everybody with me? So I'd have to use profanity to bring that across. I'm not willing to do that on tape.